بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. باب ما جاء في نعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So again, this is a subtype of clothing, and this, the Prophet ﷺ's shoe was actually a leather sole, a single leather sole, which had two straps. Single leather sole, which had two straps. And the first hadith in this particular chapter is on Qatada, قال كنت لأنس بن مالك. So Qatada asks Anas ibn Malik, and of course Anas ibn Malik is a servant of the Prophet he served the Prophet for 10 years as his personal servant, so he has a good idea of exactly what the habits of the Prophet were. كيف كان نعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم? How were the shoes of the Prophet قال إنهما قبالان, that they had each of them, that they had two straps. So the shoes of the Prophet actually had two straps. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كبالا مثنى شراكهما. The Prophet ﷺ, the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ had two straps, and each of the two straps were made from two independent strips which were sewn together. The shoe of the Prophet ﷺ was a leather sole with two straps, and each of those straps independently had two strips which were sewn together. Now this hadith is a lot of fun because one of the narrators in the hadith has a special name. One of the narrators in this hadith, and it comes in the chain, An Khalid al-Hazza. This is the name of this particular narrator, Khalid al-Hazza. Now, Hazza is a person who is a shoemaker. Right? The word Hazza means somebody who makes shoes. But what's ironic, according to the ulama, when they explicate this hadith, is that Khalid didn't have anything to do with making shoes. Okay, he wasn't a shoemaker, but he got the name shoemaker because he used to hang around shoemakers. He had a friend who was a shoemaker, so he got the name shoemaker as well. But what this particular hadith highlights is that the status of your companions play an enormous role upon you, or have an enormous impact upon you. That's one of the things that you can take home from this particular concept. Now, what do I mean? Who you hang around with is going to judge how you're going to turn out. If you hang around with people who put an emphasis on reading the Quran, you will become someone who regularly reads the Quran. If you hang around people who smoke, and you know smoking is bad, you will become a smoker. That's just how it works. There is this status in the heart that transfers in this deep type of way. Let me give you the best example. If you hung around the Prophet ﷺ, you became a Sahaba. What better example is there than that? What's the definition of a Sahaba? How do you define a Sahaba? Sahaba is defined as that person, according to the Muhaddithin, that person who saw the Prophet ﷺ in a state of Iman. He hung around the Prophet ﷺ for a moment, or she hung around the Prophet ﷺ for a moment. That person gets the ranking of a Sahaba in this tradition. Who you hang around with determines what you become. So we have to make a very, very sincere effort to look at who we keep as our company. When you keep righteous people as your company, that assists you in becoming righteous. When you keep people who make their decisions in their life according to what the pleasure of Allah is, that will begin to influence your decisions. And if you choose company that is not like that, then you will slowly deteriorate. So choosing of the company is so essential in this deen. I mean, think about it. The Sahaba becomes Sahaba only because the company of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, we don't call them the Muhaddithin, right? Yet they are the transmitters of every hadith. We don't call them the Mufassirin, yet they are the explicators of the Quran. We don't call them the Mujahideen, yet they were the greatest warriors in the history of this tradition. We call them the Sahaba. That's their most honorable title. Sadhaba, Suhba, companionship of who? Prophet ﷺ. That's the essence. Find the people who are walking on the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ and stick to them, and that will become your companionship. Through them, through their chain, the Prophet ﷺ himself. That's the secret. That's the secret of changing your life. There's only so much you can do on your own, but that's the barakah. That's where the barakah is. The other beautiful aspect of this hadith is that this shoemaker hung around the muhaddith. Right? So the shoemaker hung around the muhaddith, and what's the result? Permanently till the day of judgment, his name comes in this hadith. Because the idea, his remembrance, his recollection, the fact that this muhaddith hung around with him is permanently embedded in this hadith because he chose the companion of a scholar. That's the essence. That's the secret. And that's what we have to work towards. So much of your deen is based on companionship. Who you hang around with. Who you keep as your company. And that, we have to really, really understand this point. Because so many secrets lie within it. حدثنا عيسى ابن طحمان قال أخرج إلينا أنس بن مالك نعلين جرداوين لهما كبالان. So this particular narrator says that Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhuma brought before the people 2 shoes. And these shoes had 2 straps. قال فحدثني ثابت. Then Thabit told the narrator, بعض أن حدثني ثابت عن أنس أنهما. Thabit said later, at a later time, from Anas, narrating from Anas, أنهما كانتا نعلي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. That the 2 shoes that were actually presented before this group of people, they were actually the shoes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, a couple things about this hadith. First is that these are jardawan, bare, without hair. So the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ were made from such a leather that there was no hair on them. And this is contrary to what most of the people of the Arabian Peninsula did at that time. But the Prophet ﷺ had a special thing with his shoes, is that he chose leather that didn't have hair on it when he had his shoes made. The other thing that's highlighted in this hadith is the benefit of being the servant of the Prophet ﷺ, that Anas was able to keep the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's just an incredible barakah. So his service, one of the results of his service, along with the 4 du'as that we talked in the du'a that the Prophet ﷺ made for him, and the fact that 3 of those came true and he was hoping for the 4th, was that he had in his possession the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ. And I mean, we think of shoes as something dirty, as something that should be thrown away, but even the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ have touched the skin of the Prophet ﷺ, and they then take on a new value. And Anas was proud to display those in front of the Sahaba and say, look, shoes that you consider dirty, these are the shoes of my Prophet ﷺ. So this is just another aspect of this hadith, which, subhanAllah. عن أبيد ابن جريج أنه قال لابن عمر. So this particular narrator says to Ibn Umar رضي الله عنهما, رأيتك تلبس النعال السبتية. So this particular narrator says to Ibn Umar that verily I have seen you wearing shoes without hair. Everybody wears shoes with hair. How come you're the only one that wears shoes without hair? إني رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يلبسه النعال التي ليس فيها شعر. His response, because verily I've seen the Prophet ﷺ, and he used to wear shoes without hair. ويتودأ فيها, and he used to do wudu while wearing those shoes. Meaning because those shoes were open, the Prophet ﷺ could just stick his foot underneath, or stick his foot in the water, or put water on them, and water would get across his whole foot because the shoes were open. Or it means that the Prophet washed his feet and then put the shoes on. ويتودأ فيها فإن أحب أن ألبسها. So verily, I preferred فأنا أحب أن ألبسها. Because I saw the Prophet wearing them, I prefer that I also wear them. Now this highlights some important points. The first was